Season 2 starts now. What up, YouTube, and welcome back. Yes, it's been a long winter, but it's finally getting warmer outside, and it's time to get back on turboing this GTO. But I know I was doing last year, I was rear mounting the turbo and everything, but ran into too many problems. So this year, we're gonna remove the rear mount and move it to the front of the engine. But first, let me show you what we gotta work with. All right, so we got the car back up into the air. The first thing I want to do before I even go any farther, if you can see here and here, my oil pan is pretty much leaking everywhere. So the plan for this is I am going to drop the cradle, lower the oil pan, change the gasket, and then add in 2 oil drain or turbo drain plugs on each side, because instead of 1 turbo, we're gonna go with 2. So let me show you what my idea is to actually remove the cradle. Here we got the ball joint nut that connects to the subframe, and that other bar that's up there. So basically loosen that up, loosen the stabilizer link up, and then same thing for the other side, loosen those up. And then we pretty much got, there's 1 cradle bolt here, 1 cradle bolt there. We got 1 up in here. And it's hard to see, but there's 1 right up in there through the hole, and basically on the other side there's 1 up in there. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and get the lower ball joints loosened up, the stabilizer links loosened up, and then I'll start playing with stuff and seeing what else needs to get loosened up. The rack too, there's 2 bolts that I gotta get loosened up so I can push the rack out the way, and then hopefully the cradle will just come on down. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be heavy, but at least I gotta lower the car and raise the car if need be. So I'm gonna go ahead and start loosening up all these bolts right now. All right, so under the car, I'm gonna loosen that up. It's a 22 mil bolt. Let's loosen this up, and we'll start loosening up everything else on the way. All right, so I got it loosened up. Not finger loose yet, but enough to be able to just keep on using the ratchet. Gonna finish that. We're gonna move on to the passenger side, and then what I'm gonna do is, once at least those are done, lower the car, and then we will go up top, put the engine support bar on, because we're gonna have to loosen the 2 motor mounts in order for the cradle to drop, and at least that engine support will hold the engine up while I drop the cradle. So let me finish these and these, and we will move the car to the ground. Alright, I got that nut off. I removed the nut on top of the stabilizer link on both sides. So the nut's off there, and it's off of there. So now the next idea that I have, which I'm just winging this because as much as I've looked, everyone says pull the motor, and a few people that actually dropped the subframe didn't really show how they did it, more or less. So the next thing I'm going to do is that bolt and that bolt, so I can move the power steering rack down and out of the way. Then I will lower the car, and then the motor mount nuts, one's there and then one's there, so I'll loosen up the motor mounts, and then I will move on to actually lowering the subframe. And then there was a few bolts that were up in here to remove or to loosen up. I'm assuming they're transcooler lines and lower radiator hose. So let's see if we can see from this side. There you go. See, those are loose, and that's loose. So I have room to drop the subframe. Hopefully there won't be nothing in the way. So I'm gonna lower the car and then get the engine support on and start taking apart more stuff. Alright, so got the engine support bar all tightened down and holding the engine pretty tightly thanks to GM. Pontiac's got these nice little engine hooks to bolt chains onto. So this is really sturdy, ain't going nowhere. Everything's tightened down nicely. Okay, so back up with the car and then on to removing bolts and hoping that the engine doesn't fall out of this car on top of. All right, so now that we got the car back up in the air, the engine's supported, it is now time to start removing nuts and bolts and praying that this motor doesn't come crashing down on top of me. So we will start with removing these two power steering. WD-40. Scared me. So we'll start by removing these two bolts and moving the power steering rack out of the way, and then we move on to the motor mounts and pray that the motor is supported. So let's figure out what these are and start removing. And I'm using hand tools because I don't want to strip anything out. So probably gonna take a long time. There seems to be a nut on top of there, which makes things so much more difficult because there's so much limited space. So now I gotta find a wrench, fit up there and fit there somewhere to be able to hold this. All right, one nut and one bolt. Dirty. But let's put this off to the side with the rest of the bolts so I know everything's at. There we go. It's just that initial one. All right, so now the second one is out. Now I gotta loosen up the steering knuckle from the rack, and that should be able to move down, and I could probably just tie it up out of the way or something or other. 13mm bolt, and hopefully all this will come out nice and smooth. It literally fell right in the header, right where the collector's at. Steering coupler bolt, and wherever the hell the nut may have gone. Jesus, finally. Stupid nut got stuck in the collector of the header. Couldn't get it out. Now, if my calculations are right, the rack should just come out of position and fall right into my lap. Alright, so I'm on my last bolt. I got this little rig here to keep the back stabilized so that somehow I'm gonna have to loosen that up, hold this all at the same time for it to all come down. And I don't know how that was gonna go, but I got this one last bolt. That is I think it's out. Now the moment of truth is lowering it down and hoping the engine doesn't fall out with it. Alright, so basically what I'm gonna do here is loosen up the sway bar because it is catching on some power steering lines. So I'm gonna loosen that up, and then hopefully the cradle will drop. Then I'll be moving on to drilling the holes for the oil return lines and putting in the new baffle to prevent any kind of oiling issues. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these up, and then hopefully I can drop it. All right, so I did something. The cradle is separated from the engine. I got it held up by some makeshift stuff, made a little mess, but I've got clear access to the oil pan. Hopefully there'll be enough room to drop it, but if not, I can still lower the cradle down some more. So, cradle down. Next, I gotta drain the oil, take the oil filter off, unhook the oil feed line that goes back to the turbo, and then take the oil pan off. Okay, so after some finesse of moving, this damn stabilizer bar sucks, and then trying to hold up the cradle with this thing kind of getting in the way of lowering the oil pan, but I was able to get enough room and get it right through the bottom there. Slid it right out, and there's the oil pan. Doesn't look too bad. I'm gonna brake clean it and everything. This gasket looks destroyed, so I'm gonna remove this, get the new gasket on, and then I'm probably gonna drill my holes for the returns, probably just on each side. So I got some fittings. I got plenty of these, a few of them. Basically, I'm just gonna drill the hole, washer goes through the hole. You put the other washer and you tighten it down, and basically I have an oil drain without having to TIG weld bungs, which I'd rather not do. So I'm gonna go ahead, clean this up, and then I'm gonna install the new baffle where it has the little flaps in there to prevent the oil from sloshing around, because the oil pickup tube is right here. So if you're turning, you're accelerating, oil is gonna wanna pretty much go away from where the pickup tube is at. So with these flaps that are in here, what that does is it keeps the oil in there, and you'll never have any kind of oiling issues. So let's go ahead and get this installed. All right, let me show you guys what I did here. So let's turn the oil pan towards you guys. All right, so I already went ahead and took this off. All that is held down by two 10mm nuts. That comes right off. Flip this back around. There are two more 10mm nuts, and I'm gonna take that off. That'll remove this crossover pipe, and then this baffle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts, and that'll come right out. One and two. Alright, so now for this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the double nut trick, where you thread one down, thread the other one down, you tighten it, And then basically you just use the one that you screw down to tighten it. Well, to loosen it. And then it loosens right up. Alright, so that's finger loose. So now loosen the nut up. You can loosen them both up at the same time. So the oil pan, it's all nice and cleaned out. Wiped it all down, took a razor blade to the edges, already wiped it all down. So now what I'm gonna do is put the baffle in, but I'm not gonna bolt it down because I wanna see how much room I have on each side to put my my fancy oil drain. So that's with the new baffle. So I figure as close to the engine as possible. So probably to keep it symmetrical, we'll probably drill out the holes right there and then bolt those in. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and prep this to get drilled. Alright, so I went ahead and made the hole, but I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. But basically that's where it's gonna be from the outside. If you can see on the other side, pretty much gonna be symmetrical. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep reaming out this hole just enough to fit that drain plug through. Alright, so I do want to go ahead and clean up the oil pan because it is pretty dirty from the years of the oil leaking. I'm gonna go ahead and set the camera up and you guys can see how I got this one on the other side. Alright, so I got my big step bit just to make it a little bit bigger, not much. See how that fits? Perfect. So, there's my oil drain. But I'm gonna go ahead and get the other side done, and then I'm gonna clean the oil pan back out. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get this side. Flip it around. Get my pilot hole going here. And we're through. Take the monster off. Put the little one back on. The little one basically goes all the way through, but I would rather start with the little, then move to the monster, and sticking with the monster. Woo! That thing is violent when it starts stepping down. Let's just see. Oh, perfect. Don't even got any bigger. The holes, one here, look pretty damn symmetrical. So, clean off all these little burrs, get the oil pan back cleaned up, clean off the outside, and then we'll be ready to put the gasket and the drain plugs in there. Alright, so now I got the oil pan completely cleaned out, brake clean. I power washed it, dried it, air dried it, brake clean, a lot of air drying. And yeah, so now I'm going to install my baffle, and then I'm going to install my drain plugs. So, baffle in, 6 bolts, a little bit of brake clean. And baffles in now. The only thing I'm debating for this, if I should put a little bit of gasket sealant down there. Yeah, I know I haven't put the gasket on yet, but I'm just thinking out loud. So, one O-ring, the other O-ring. And then the nut. One thing I want to do, just in case, I want to be on the safe side. A little bit of Loctite so this damn nut doesn't back off. Okay. It's a big one. It's a 27 mil. Okay. First one in. Next one. Okay. And both in. There's the one. There's the other. Alright, and then there's the pan, pretty much all back assembled. Got the oil drains on each side. Got my oil feed. Now it's time to go back up to the engine right after I put the gasket on. Got the oil pan back in. There's one drain and there is the other. And I should have enough clearance for when the cradle goes back up on both sides. So now it's putting everything back together, which is not going to be fun. Alright, so cradle's back in. Everything's all bolted and tightened down. The control arm bolts, those are back in. Both sides. Everything's back in. Everything's tight. The only thing I haven't done yet is the rack, because if you can see up there, that is in the way when you remove the headers. So yeah, the header's gonna have to come out next. That side, either way, can go from top or bottom, but for the most part, everything's all back together. I don't have any leftover nuts or bolts. Everything's good. Alright, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Got a lot more work on this car. Next, I don't know what we'll do. I'll surprise you. If you didn't like it, it's too late. You already watched it. Peace!